Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome back to our Betweenlands Spotlight tutorial series. So today we're going to be covering in depth the Sludgeon dungeon. This is found in Sludge Plains biomes. It's very, very hard to miss, of course. It's a very large structure. And I find that it's not nearly as rare as like the White Fortress. I tend to find these a bit more often with default settings than the White Fortress. But it is a lot larger of a dungeon. It does take a bit more time to go through. We're going to be going through it pretty quick today, mainly in creative mode so we can see everything within it and how everything works. But this is actually a slightly specialized biome. It's actually called a Sludge Plains clearing whenever you find this place. And whenever you get close to it, it will pop up and say Sludgeon Tower. And when you first approach this place, there's not a lot that you can do until you get to the top. There's all these different floors, but there's not a lot that you can do with those. There is going to be, occasionally, you will spot pots of chance and things up along this, like these right here. So you can loot those when you first get here. But first things first, you're going to want to go to the very, very top. And before you tackle this tower, I do suggest you bring a couple things. First up, I suggest that you bring a bow with numerous arrows. Depending on how good of a shot you are under pressure, a stack may be fine, but you may want to bring some extras just in case, especially if it's your first time going through this dungeon. And I also suggest that you bring a bar of octane and some moss. Because when you get to the top of this tower, you're going to see these staircases that lead up to these braziers. And if you've watched my Celestial Journey series, you probably know what we're going to have to do with these. We're going to have to put moss on these, and we're going to have to hold right click with our octane ingot and light these. And you can see that they shoot a beam over to this, and basically, if you hadn't guessed, you have to light all 4 of these. And this is what actually starts up your dungeon and kind of activates it. Now get ready, because as soon as you place and burn your last moss, some mobs are going to spawn. These guys right here, these are Emberling Shamans, and they're pretty unique to this dungeon, so they will cast some fire spells and things, and they will drop undying embers upon death. And if we pop into survival mode, you can see they do this like bouncing thing, and they try to land on you, and they can shoot. Yeah, see that right there? That's where they're shooting fire down, basically. I'm going to go ahead and pop back into survival mode, or creative mode, and kill these off. They can be, depending on your armor and your weapons, fire resistance will help you out if you have that available to you. They're not too bad, but I do suggest you burn them down quickly. Their range attacks do sting a bit, as you saw. But once you get that lit, what you're going to have to do is this right here. This is basically like a little puzzle. If you ever played like Legend of Zelda, you're probably familiar with what you have to do here. Basically, we need to redirect all of this. I think it'll be, yeah, this one right here. And basically we need to redirect this and fire it out. It's probably going to need to go in that direction. So there we go. We're going to fire it over to there. And then this is where it gets a little bit time-consuming. You're going to have to actually leave and then come up on this side, because you can't walk through these walls. And now we need to, shoot it off in a different direction. It could be, this one could work, but this one also could work. To here, and this can take a little bit, so just be aware. Know that it does take a minute to get this all finished out. It's usually not too difficult in my experience. I've done it a few times now. It's not too difficult, but it does take a little bit of time. So, and if you ever get stuck, just look around and kind of see where you could possibly be sending this stuff. And in some cases, there are a couple different options, so you may play around with those and see where it goes. But basically, what you're trying to do, your long-term goal, and I'm going to fill out most of this off camera, but go ahead and fire that over, fire that up. But basically what you're trying to do is get the beam. There's going to be a spot right here where you can fire it out. You can see that I'm going to need basically to hit this one from above. So I'm going to need to hit this and then send the beam outside of the tower. Send it over to this, and then over to this, down, and across to where it hits this spot. And that's what's going to open up the dungeon. So give me just a second here while I get this stuff all ran around. I need to go over to that side. And I'll be back once I get this all fixed over. Okay, you can see that I've got the beam now shooting outside. And if we pop out here, we redirect it. Let's see. There we go. Redirect it over here. And then we just redirect that. Boom. And it's going to open up the entrance to the Sludgeon dungeon. Alright. Now, going down in here, you're going to see these right here. This. There we go. You can see there's these sludge worms that come out of those. Those are sludge worm holes, basically. And you're going to be encountering these a lot. So these can be damaged and broken. So just bear that in mind. But heading down in here, we're going to enter the first floor of the labyrinthine vaults. This dungeon is 7 floors. So just be prepared. Bring plenty of materials with you. It's not an overly long dungeon, but it can take you a little bit, depending on how fast you move through things. And also, you're going to want to take note of this. You're going to find these on each floor. Right as you walk down the stairs, they're going to be right there. And I suggest I tend to kind of just draw them out like halfway, because it just makes my life a little bit easier as far as remembering them. You can also screenshot these, and then you can also just try to remember them. Also, just drawing out like half of them, or just roughly, so you kind of know the general shape, does tend to work. And they're basically going to be your key code. Imagine these doors is kind of working on a key code, and that is the key code for the end of this floor, basically. Now, once you get down here, there's a couple things you're going to want to take note of, and each floor is different. That's a sludge wormhole, and you can see that I can damage it, and there we go. That kills it, and I get sludge worm egg sac. And we'll talk more about these a bit later on. You can actually make your own sludge worms. So there are going to be these also. These are weak tiles, and if you sneak over these, you're going to be okay. But if you stand on them, like kind of run across them, they are going to break open. And below them is going to be stagnant water. So, of course, we've talked about stagnant water. It's nasty. It's not a good thing to find yourself, in. Also, you're going to see pots and things along the walls. You can break these, but aside from that, you can't really break the blocks in this dungeon until you kill the boss, as per usual. And aside from that, I mean, this first floor is fairly easy, so you can move pretty quickly through this. And it's basically just one big maze. You'll see little areas like this. Sometimes you'll find a chest back in there, on some of the later floors especially. But anyways, we just kind of have to make our way through this floor. Not a whole lot. Just watch out for the stagnant water, and there's going to be worms that are kind of slithering around through this area. Alright, I just found the next layer. You're going to find a door like this. Now, that's not always the case. Later on, we're going to have some added doors that can be found. But anyways, if you put in the code that we got at the beginning, it's going to open up the door like so, and it's going to lead us down into the second floor of the labyrinthine vaults. Now, this floor still has the broken mud tiles. You're going to see our code right there. I'm not going to write it down in this case. And on this floor, if we pop into survival mode, I hear them up ahead, you're going to find what's called shamblers. And we talked a little bit about shamblers, sort of. But as you can see, what they do is they use their tongues to grab you and pull you in. And as you can see, they can be a little bit of a nightmare. They're not doing like a ton of damage or anything like that. But they can be a nightmare, especially when there's a lot of them. As you saw, they just keep grabbing you. And these guys drop our shambler tongues that we use to make the grappling hook that we talked about, a few episodes back. If you want to get these, great place to farm them right here, because of course you're not going to be able to find shamblers anywhere else. There's a whole lot of unique mobs and unique plants. You can see some of the unique plants around as we're going through this dungeon. But aside from that, that's really all that's on this floor, is just the addition of shamblers. We did find our very first chest, so we can see there's some assorted things. Just general lootables, Betweenlands lootables. In those, there's more chests here, and more chests over here. Alright, I went ahead and just kind of snapped open this. I probably won't put on in the codes every floor, just because it's faster for me. Just kind of breaking that open. But on this next floor, there's a couple additional things to look out for. First up, this is the first floor that is going to have these spike traps. You can see these. They kind of work like the ones in the White Fortress, but they're also going to be on the walls and stuff. So if you walk in front of these when they're open, yeah, like that, they're going to shoot out. So you want to kind of avoid these. I mean, once again, they don't do a ton of damage, but that damage can add up and can be a bit nasty depending on what's going on and what mobs are around and stuff like that. Now also on this floor there are these right here. These are egg sacs, like worm egg sacs, and if you get very close to them they will hatch. They're probably not going to do it because I'm in creative mode, but I do want to show you, if you right click these with a net, you will get the sludge worm egg sacs. Of course you can get these from other ways, but if you have a net on you, you can deal with them in that way. But in addition, we go up over here, you can see that hatched into sludge worms whenever I got close to it. You're also going to see, I just saw one right there. There we go. This is a lamprey. And basically what it does, it will like pull in air, and whenever it does, you're going to get sucked in close to it. And if you get close enough for it to really do a melee attack, I guess I didn't get close enough. I kind of slid over the corner, but not on the block itself. It will hit you. It will do some damage. It will also sap your decay down. This dungeon does have a bit of decay creatures and traps and things with the stagnant water, so bringing a bit of like sap jello or something is highly advised. So, but that's really all that's on this floor. You'll find the general plants and chests and things like that. But those are the two additions that are added on in this floor, or the three additions. You got the spike traps, the egg sacs, and the lampreys to look out for. And we have found the entrance to the next floor. Now, once on the fourth floor, you're going to see these. These are sludge jet turrets. And if we go into survival mode, if I get up close to these, you can see that they splash me with like sludge. And the only way that you can hurt these and kill them is by finding their eye. You pretty much have to wait for it to come around and attacking it. They're very fragile, but they do only have that one spot where they can be damaged, so it is something worth noting. Now, in addition, on this floor, that's really the only danger that you're going to have to deal with, like new danger. Of course, you're going to have the broken tiles and all that. But there is going to be a hidden door, and I believe it's going to be, yeah, it's this one, because you can actually, if you want to be ready, you can see through this corner. Now, depending on how it spawns, it may spawn in a way, there's actually a Chiromo, it looks like, back there. But there's actually a way that, if there was a wall that runs here and it's just kind of at the end of a hallway, you may not be ready for it. But in some cases, you can see that there's going to be a secret door. And if we open this, and I'm going to use what's called room door keys. These actually drop from one of the mini bosses, which we're about to be encountering. But these can open any door just by right-clicking. They put in the correct thing. But this is the Barashi, and this is kind of the mini boss of this dungeon. You can see it's actually a really cool model. A lot of times you don't ever get to see it because it's facing you, but it's actually got kind of this broken leg and this wheel that kind of move it along, right? Really, really neat boss. I'm not really sure what the inspiration is, but I absolutely love this boss. And overall, it's not too bad. Really, the only things you have to watch out with in this boss, or for this like mini boss, it'll do like the normal melee attack. If it gets up close, you're going to take damage, right? That's pretty standard across Minecraft. It also does kind of like the shockwave sword, and it does like a shockwave that comes out, and it can knock you back and stuff and do a little bit of damage. And then it also does a scream. It'll, you know, kind of like whenever we first open up the door, it's going to emit a scream, and it's going to deal damage and knock you back also. So, for example, if I get up, smack this guy, he's busy doing something right now. There we go. There's a shockwave. It seems like he really wants to go over there. But you'll notice that the Ancient Greatsword is actually really good for this fight. There's the scream. But if I believe it is aimed, and so he turned away, so it doesn't seem like I took any damage. But there we go. That time I took damage. That's what the scream looks like. And there we go. We've killed him, and you can see he dropped a rune door key, as well as a life shard, so there is that. But if we head on back, oh, it looks like he broke one of the chests that was here. Yeah, there we go. Ring of Gathering. This is one of the rings from a boss. Only drops, well, it doesn't drop from the boss, but, you know, it comes from the chest. It will generally, unless something goes wrong, it will always be back here, alongside a bunch of, like, just kind of general lootable things within the chest back here. We're going to talk more about the Ring of Gathering at the end of the episode. And then, in addition, you will find this right here. You can right-click. This is the Ancient Battle Axe. It does attack like that. It does pretty substantial damage, kind of like the Ancient Greatsword, you know. There we go. Pretty decent weapon, kind of a neat one. It's got kind of a cool little texture here. But it can only be found in this room after killing the Barashi. So, also one thing I want to bring up, just so you're aware, one thing I forgot to mention, there is going to be these little creatures called ash sprites. You know, they kind of sink down to the ground. They're going to have a chance to spawn when you break any kind of Urn of Chance or anything within this dungeon. They're not too bad. They don't do a ton of damage, but you can see that they are incorporeal, and they will move through walls and through floors and things like that. So they can be a little bit hard to hit, especially in tight corridors like this. But they will spawn, or they have a chance to spawn anytime that you break those Urns of Chance within this dungeon. So just kind of bear that in mind. They are going to be the what mob you're going to need to kill to get cremains, though. And cremains, you need to bear that in mind. The cremains are only dropped from them, and that's how you're going to make sensors. You don't necessarily need a ton of these, but I would suggest that you get at least a handful of cremains. More if you want to make inanimate angry pebbles, which we'll talk about angry pebbles later, but you tend to get a lot of angry pebbles, so it's usually not too big of a concern unless you basically just want to go mining with it. So now we'll move on down to the next floor. This floor, this will be the fifth floor. On this one, you're going to encounter a couple things. You're going to still have your stagnant water. You're going to have your general encounter mobs and stuff like that. You're also going to find living roots. These right here, and they kind of come out of these little holes. You can damage these and kill them, but basically if you go through, they're going to try to smack you, right? Fairly easy. Usually not too big of a concern. There is also going to be splode shrooms and puff shrooms on this floor. This right here is a puff shroom. If we get up close to this, oh, and that's a splode shroom, or puff shroom, yeah. These will spawn up, and they'll kind of do like a burst of flame that kind of comes up, and what it does is it grabs your weapons. If it's near you, you can see it takes my my equipped weapon, my equipped item. Doesn't really do much in the way of damage, like any damage, but you do need to kind of avoid these because they will steal your stuff. And then puff shrooms, or splode shrooms, I keep getting them mixed up. Puff shrooms are the ones that take your items. Splode shrooms, if you get near these, they're going to explode. So just bear that in mind. If you get in this stuff, you're going to get blindness and elixir of decay. So another way to lose your decay bar, which is great. And one thing that I want to mention right here, also if you break these, it will emit that. But you can, if you want to, you can mine up these puff shrooms, you know, with like with a pickaxe or something. But you can also gather them with shears. And what we can do is we can shear these off, and that's how you're going to get puff shroom tendrils. The only way to get those. Now, if we move on down to the 6th layer, this is where the floors get really, really crazy. So in this floor, you're going to have what's called crypt crawlers, and you're also going to have carved rotten bark. So some of these arches, or maybe it's all of them, I don't know. Usually I don't notice them, to be honest, but if we go up underneath this, yeah, you're going to see that certain parts of this do fall down and try to hit us in the head. So just bear that in mind when you're going through here. There's a crypt crawler. There's a couple different variations. Sometimes they're on 4 legs, sometimes they're standing up and they have a weapon, and they're pretty much like mole people that live down here. Pretty nasty creatures. They don't really do anything special. They just try to melee you, so we're just going to kill them off. They're not too difficult, but sometimes they can jump you, like in a pack or something like that. Yeah, there's one that's on 4 legs, kind of crawling around. And you're also going to be able to find a special dungeon door. Now, in addition, one thing to note about this floor is if we take a vial, any kind of, you know, dent with this vial, we can right-click it, we can get bottled fog. This will be used in some alchemy and stuff like that, used in the sensor. So this is where you're going to get it, this floor and the next floor. You're going to be able to get that. In addition, there is going to be a secret door. This is probably it. That does fall if you're in survival mode and it hits you. It's going to instantly break your helmet, so just be aware. Basically, they're pushing it down on you, these crypt crawlers are. And if we go into here, we end up in the winding walkways area. And this area, we can actually climb up. You can see there's a little pathway here. And we go into this place that's just going to be full of crypt crawlers. This is a battle going through here. As you can see, there is a lot of them. And if we carry on over down to here, which this will be a little bit different. Sometimes you may not have the walkway up directly in front of you. So just a heads up. But these will kind of be a little bit random as to the way that they spawn in. Push on through. You can see some living roads and just tons of crypt crawlers. This place is a battle, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it once you get to the end. So we'll push on through, push on down into here. And then we go down this, we go into the what's called the crypt tunnels. Now this place is where all of our loot is going to be found. And you will sometimes see some crypt crawlers down here. Night vision is on, it's just very, very dark. Right down here. This is actually a spawner for crypt crawlers. And what we're going to have to do is break this vine, and it drops that, and it's going to stop them from spawning in this area. And there's going to be, there should be a few of these. Yeah, there's another one. Just stop that up. And this is going to stop them from spawning, because normally it's going to be pouring out crypt crawlers. Not really pouring out, but, you know, they're going to be climbing up out of these holes. And that's a lot of the reason why there's so many crypt crawlers above us, is because they're basically funneling up from this. This is like where their home is, I guess. Like where the crypt crawlers live. But then we're going to make it to the crypt. And you're going to see some urns and things around here, but there's also going to be this. This is where you get the sword that I've been using, the ancient greatsword. And then in addition, while you're down here, there is going to be some false walls. Like, I can walk into this one. Yeah, there we go. That's actually the one I was looking for. So back in here is where you find the entire ancient armor set. That's back here. It's going to be full durability and everything. So that's where you get the other ancient pieces. And there'll also be some additional false walkways. I know there's one right here. This leads back basically to the entrance. As you can see, it's a little bit of a battle to get to that stuff, but the ancient armor is definitely worth it with the added magic resist. it's a very, very good suit of armor, especially if you enchant it with stuff like mending, protection, whatnot. It's going to be quite useful. Now, after you find that, you're pretty much just looking for the exit. Let's go ahead and pop down here. Now, this is actually a very precarious situation to find yourself in. But this floor, this is the 7th layer. This is the last full-fledged floor. And it's going to be filled with these moving walls. Now, by default, I will say there is a thing in the configs. I had to adjust some things for tails where you can set what can these not break. Because normally, if I was to grab, say, like a piece of this andesite, and I throw this down right there, this moving wall is just going to bust right through that. It's going to break it. It's not going to drop anything. But there is a config setting where you can adjust that, so just be aware that that's there. And but by default, it's just like gravestones that aren't breakable. And this is pretty much what this floor consists of, is these moving walls. And then, when we reach the end, this leads us down into the 8th floor, which really isn't so much a floor as it is just the boss fight itself. So if we head on down, we have reached now the Pit of Decay. Probably the coolest area in all of modded. There's a lot of motion. I love motion, of course, in modded. There's a lot of motion here. And you can see some hints. If you look up here, you can see some arrows that have been fired into this. That kind of tells you basically what we're going to have to do. But before we get to that, if you look around, you're going to see there's going to be these that shoot the sludge at you. There's going to be spike traps. There's going to be mobs spawning, like the sludge worms and sludges and small sludges. And then once we get going, some of the larger sludges can spawn. Let's go ahead. This is where, if you recall at the beginning, I mentioned we're going to need a bow. We're going to need arrows. This is where that comes into play. We're going to need arrows here. And what we can do is we can fire this in. And if you're going around like this, you're going to have to hit all 4 sides. So you're going to want to do like that and then run over to this side. And you're trying to dodge the way that it's blocking with its little shields, right? And every time that you successfully hit all 4, it's going to drop down, but it will start to kind of raise back up to its original spot. You only have so long before they reset, and you can see that it breaks the little spectral chains off and allows it to fall. It can be a little bit difficult. It's not too bad. I did it the first, my first survival mode try without any issues. But with all the mobs spawning and things firing at you, it can get a little bit crazy trying to do this. But I do suggest, I find that it's easiest to focus on not waiting for the shields to go through, but instead firing on these. And right now I'm standing on the floor that rotates. It will kind of spin you around this and kind of speed up your movement to make this very possible. But of course you are going to still have to dodge the mobs and things that are going to be attacking you. So if you want to see me do it in survival mode, I did do it within MC Eternal, I think was my first go around with it. But after you do it enough, it's going to fall down and it's going to bust open the prison. It's going to spew a lot of XP at this point. And if we give it just a minute, it's going to spawn the actual boss. The boss proper, if you will. But it does give you time to gather up the XP. And there we go. There is the Sludge Menace boss. Now you're still going to have to deal with a few, mob spawning and things like that throughout this fight. Now this fight is actually not all that difficult. I'm going to go ahead, actually I've got the wiki pulled up so I can read off the different boss fight mechanics. To be honest, when I fought them, I didn't notice a lot of them because I'm pretty much just beating on the boss till it dies. It does have a decent health pool, as you can see. It takes a little bit to kill this guy off. But as far as his attacks go, sometimes he'll slam the ground, which spawns sludgy particles, and then he'll slowly get up. That's a very common attack. Whenever I was fighting him in survival, I come across that fairly often. He also does pierce-like attacks, where he folds himself in on himself and then throws his head, and it deals damage on contact. It will spin around the room real fast, and basically it will hit, you know, like an area around like this and stuff. That's actually pretty common too, but fairly easy to dodge as long as you back up. Then you're generally going to be out of it. He'll also spin around, and if he's kind of up high like this, you're not going to have to worry about it too much. You can kind of just stay right down here, because he's going to hit the upper sections of the area. But if he is down a bit lower, you may have to use a shield and block the attack, or run back up to like right in here, and he'll miss you. It's a fairly easy attack to dodge in my experience, not too bad. It can also grab the player, which as long as he holds you, he's going to regen his health. And so you're just going to want to attack him till he lets you go. And once again, a shield can block that. And if you're far away and up high, so if you get up here or something like that, he is going to shoot sludge balls that will give you slowness and deal a little bit of damage. And then, of course, he can also summon some adds, which include leeches, sludge worms, and sludge worm egg sacs, which, whenever it does that, will also shoot these sludge balls at you. So I'll show you a little bit of the fight, like in survival mode, just so you can kind of see kind of what's going on and stuff. Like I said, it's not too bad of a fight. That's his spinning attack, and you can see I can jump over it. But this ring, actually, because I'm still wearing the Ring of Ascension, it can be used to dodge that also. That was its Pierce attack. That's its Slam attack. But as you can see, I mean, he's not doing a ton of damage. Honestly, the dungeon is the hardest part of this whole boss and everything. Right now he's shooting, you can see those little sludge balls that are coming out. Those are the sludge attacks, and then he spawns some sludge worms. That is a giant sludge worm. It's just like a larger version. Some leeches that are leeching onto me. He hasn't done his grab attack, but it might be a little bit hard for him to do that right now. Because I'm flying, I don't know. Leeches. A lot of adds. And there comes a couple more giant sludge worms. Just having some healing items for this fight is really all you necessarily need. That and a sword. Especially this sword, because it can cleave extra mobs. Because it attacks everything in front of you. This sword can be quite nice for dealing with that. And then, of course, having the Ring of Ascension does help out a lot, because I can just kind of hover above this boss. So, but that's basically the fight. I'm going to go ahead and just kill him down so we can see his death animation and his drops and stuff real quick. So, overall, not too bad of a fight. There we go. Not a boss. And, once again, pretty easy fight. Honestly, the dungeon's harder than the boss itself, as well as the adds. I think the adds are honestly the biggest issue in this fight, because some of them can deal a substantial amount of damage, and with the amount of them, you can find yourself in pretty precarious situations, usually due to them. Upon death, he is going to drop an amulet slot, which of course we've already covered, and then the Ring of Dispersion. This is another, I guess, the last boss ring that we have to go over. Now, if we... let's go ahead and head on up. I'm going to go into Spectator so you can kind of see this dungeon sort of at a distance. So this is basically what it looks like, in Spectator mode. So a whole lot of stuff around through here, but this is the Spectator mode view of it. A really, really cool dungeon, a lot of really cool mechanics and things, and just a whole lot of fun to go through. Now, as far as the rings that we got the Ring of Gathering and we got the Ring of Dispersion. So first up, we have the Ring of Dispersion. It's fairly straightforward. What it allows us to do is it allows us to hold shift, and we can now just walk through walls. And we get that cool little like visual effect like this. And if you ever decide, okay, like I'm going through a cave and I'm like, man, this is taking forever to go through it, I can just stand up and it moves me back to where I started, right? Like that. You hear a little sound effect because it teleports me back, because I haven't actually gotten to a safe place to stand. And the Ring of Gathering, we're going to briefly cover this, but I'm not going to cover all the ins and outs of it in this episode. And the reason being, we'll cover more of it when we talk more. We're going to have a dedicated episode to kind of pet taming and things like that. But for example, I think it should work with a Harlequin Toad. So let me grab this, throw down a Harlequin Toad. Going to go ahead and equip the Ring of Gathering really quick. And for example, if I am wearing this and I tame a creature, there we go. We've now tamed the Harlequin Toad. So basically the way that it works is if I come over here and I'm like, oh man, I need my Harlequin Toad, let me just right click this. It's going to use a little bit of XP and it's going to summon it to my side, right? And it works with any kind of tamed minion. So I can basically just summon my pet to me. Now bear in mind that it doesn't really work well with pets that are in unloaded chunks. So just bear that in mind. And cross-dimensionally, it can be a little bit wonky as well trying to do that. But if I run, way over here, and I'm like, oh, where did my pet go? There we go. I can just summon it to me. So that's the basic gist of it. Now, in addition, if a pet dies, you can use the animator to bring it back. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a pet taming dedicated episode, because that's one of the beauties of the Ring of Gathering, is being able to kind of revive your pet. Also, if you have a tar minion and it dies and you don't pick up the inanimate tar minion that's dropped to basically reanimate it, you can get it with this Ring of Gathering as well. So just bear that in mind. We're also going to talk about the sludge pets that come from this dungeon in that episode as well. But this episode is getting a bit long, so I'd rather cut this one off. And we'll talk about that stuff in a little bit later episode. So anyways, with that, we're going to end out this episode. I know it ran a bit long, but it's a big dungeon to cover, in all honesty. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already, to stay updated with when new videos come out. And I hope this video was of help to you guys. And I hope to see you guys in the next episode, which is going to be the Chiromal Matron. So stay tuned for that. And until then, as always, do take care. Stay safe. I'll see you guys then.